Rolling.
Today, June 1, 2004, we are speaking with Ed Pollard of Altamont, New York. This interview is taking place in his Altamont home at 1 p.m. He served in the United States Army Air Corps. The interviewers are Kenneth and June Hunter. What is your full name, and when and where were you born?
I was born in Tarrytown, New York, Sleepy Hollow, in December 29, 1921.
And what did you do before you entered the military service?
I worked in a gas station part-time, and I worked for the Pullman car company in Grand Central Station in New York City as a passenger representative, which meant I went down to the Pullman cars, and if some big wheel movie actor or actress or some big wheel was getting on the train, I would make sure that the compartment was all set and ready to go for them. Matter of fact, Carol Lombard was one of the ones that rode the train, and she was killed in an airplane accident after she left New York, a day or two later. And the Hawaiian girl who was with Bing Crosby and them, and what was her name?
Dorothy Lamour?
Yeah, Dorothy Lamour. She was one of the ones that I saw off. Several other big wheels had to make sure that everything was all right for them to get on the train, and because they were going to Chicago. It was the 20th Century Limited.
Do you remember about how long that trip took?
17 hours,
17
I think.
hours. Wow. And now, what high school did you go to?
North Tarrytown,
North Terre.
which is now Sleepy Hollow.
Now, did you volunteer to go into the military service?
Well, that's a debatable question. The friend of mine who he lived across the street for, I guess, about 20 years. And I saw him one day, and he got his draft notice that he was going to go in a couple of weeks. So I said, "Gee, Bill, I think I'll go with you." So I went down to the volunteer to get in, and they wouldn't take me. They said, "You have to go to the draft board and get a clearance because you're probably close on the list." And I went to the draft board, I went to the draft board, and they said, "Well, we'll just move your name up, and you'll go with Bill." So that's what happened. I went with him when he went in. That was we went in on August 14th, 1942, and we went to Fort J, which is an island in the Hudson River down near the Statue of Liberty, and that's where they signed us up and asked us if we like boys or girls and all them kind of questions. And then we went to Camp Upton out in Long Island, stayed there for a couple of days, and they gave us some shots. I don't think they gave us all of our shots, but they gave us some, and of course they gave us clothes. We were in the military now. And then they sent us to Atlantic City. I was in the President's Hotel in Atlantic City, which is way down near the end of at that time, was way down near the end of the boardwalk. And they gave us more shots in Atlantic City because they already lost our medical records.
Oh, you had to do them all over
Yeah,
again.
had to do them all
Oh
over.
my.
And I'm not sure, but we were only in Atlantic City for maybe a week or two. And one day they had us out in formation, and they said England was in real bad shape, and they wanted aerial gunners for our airplanes. And anybody that wants to go be an aerial gunner, take one step forward, and you'll be out of here tonight. Well, I looked at Bill, and he said, you know, what were we, 20? Step forward. We did. So they took us back by truck to the hotel, get your stuff, pack it up, took us out to the train, put us on a train. No, they fed us first, good. And then put us on a train, and the next thing I know, we were someplace in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is this way, England is that way. And in order to get to England, you know, you have to go up to Maine or someplace. And that didn't mean much, but I knew we were in Pennsylvania. And then, of course, it got dark. It's get dark, and we were in someplace in Ohio, in a railroad yard. And I said, Bill, we're either on the wrong train or they ain't taking us to England. Next thing, we were in Sandusky, Ohio. Then we went to, well, we ended up in the stockyards in Chicago. This ain't right. Wrong direction. And then they put us in the Stevens Hotel overnight. And next day, of course, we were asking questions. And you know what answers we're getting? None, or the wrong ones. And we ended up in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're going to go to radio school. Well, maybe they're teaching us how to be radio men so we can be gunners. We took that. But, so anyhow, we went to radio school, Madison, Wisconsin, and graduated, of course. They gave us some kind of a diploma. I think I got a copy of it. Then we went to Boca Raton, Florida, to radar school. Now, you know, we didn't have radar. We had it, but it wasn't very good. And we were trained on English radar. English had a better radar than we did. So did the Japanese at that time of the war. And I forget how many weeks. It wasn't very long. But we went. The funny part of that was they had MPs there. You lived 12 guys in a shed in Boca Raton, Florida. First, we were in the clubhouse, which is a very elite place. Then they had these MPs that didn't know right from wrong or up from down, but they were MPs and they had a gun, 45, loaded. Well, they took us to the classroom. We were in the barbed wire. We couldn't get out of that place because it was so secret, radar. And the guy, the MP, there was two of them, came and got us every morning, took us to breakfast, took us to school, took us to lunch, took us home to the barracks, and there we were. Well, every morning, now there's 12 of us, every morning we'd fall out and he'd go, call your name, you know, and everybody go, you know how they do it in the Army. And then he'd go, and he'd write it on with his finger, you know. That's how smart he was to get 12. So anyhow, we graduated from there with a really quick graduation. Well, so was the radio mechanics school up in Wisconsin. Then I went to Kellyfield, Texas, to air traffic control school, a control tower operator. And that again was a quick, real quick course. But one of the things that I remember there mostly was before I went into the Army, one of my uncles was in the Air Corps, or whatever they called it, in World War I, over in France. And he had a picture, a big long picture like that, of the Aero Squadron that he was in. Maybe you've seen them, these long pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that over his fireplace. So when I got to Kellyfield, Texas, I remember him talking about the water tower that was near where he stayed, and that they had a picture of that. And so when I got to Kellyfield, they put us in W Company. Now, the Air Force didn't have these W companies, but because in his day, the Air Corps was part of the Signal Corps. I think we still were also, but I'm not sure of that. So anyhow, I wrote him a letter, and I told him that they got a picture like you got over your fireplace. And he wrote me back, he said, I was in W Company. And it was an old wooden building, you know, and the threshold to the door was all worn out from guys walking back and forth. Real old building. And so he told me where he was in the picture. And I couldn't pick him out, but I saw the picture down there. And I always remembered that. And then I went to Bombardier Navigator training school I wasn't the Bombardier Navigator. I went there for advanced training on air traffic control, because there in the morning they would send out about 100 airplanes to bomb targets in the desert, and they would go like a regular bombing mission would overseas. So it gave us our advanced training in getting the airplanes off the ground, and then they came back before lunch, and another group went out. They came back before supper, another group went out after supper, and they came back around midnight. Then we closed down. And then I got orders to go to ship overseas. Well, I didn't know. That's not right. I got orders to go to Miami, Florida, and I actually stayed in the Kellogg Hotel in Hialeah. It's near the dog racetrack. I think it's still there. in Florida, in Hialeah. And we were there a few days, and you had to look at the bulletin board every morning to see if your name came up, and my name came up on the bulletin board as a radio operator with a group of, and then they introduced us to the group, and there were like, I think there was 3 of us that were radio operators. There were 4 pilots, a couple of gunners, like about 3 crews that they stuffed on a B-24, a brand new Henry Ford B-24. And we flew that overseas to India. And that's how we got to India. We went down through the Caribbean, through Africa, or North America, northern part of South America, to Natal, Brazil, which is that way out on the point where Brazil comes around, and then Ascension Island, the Gold Coast of Africa, and then crossed through Africa, and the wind blew us off course so we could see the pyramids, you know. We flew over them, and then we landed in, we weren't supposed to, but there was a very bad storm, and we landed in Aden. That's where that the coal got bombed. We landed, that was neutral. We couldn't fly through Saudi Arabia. That was neutral. So, but we landed in Aden, and refueled, waited overnight, and then took off for Karachi, India. And when I got to India, I went to New Delhi. Oh, I saw that big. I stayed in that big dirigible hangar. You heard about the big dirigible hangar, and the Germans and English built it, because the Germans and the English were flying dirigibles back and forth, and they made it into a big barracks. You can put a lot of soldiers in the dirigible hangar. Then I went to New Delhi. I was there for a while. Agra, where the Taj Mahal is, saw that. Was there for a while. Calcutta, saw the black hole of Calcutta, and the dirt. There's another point. When we went to landing in Calcutta, there was something like 23,000 Indians died from some bad disease, like cholera or something like that. And they laid them on the street. They didn't put them away. They just left them there, or somebody would eventually pick them up. And then I moved up into the Assam Valley and put up my first radio station in the Assam Valley. And from then on, it was the Japanese would come and drop bombs on us. And I moved around 9 different locations because I was a mechanic, I was a radar man, and air traffic control. And you know, give me a broom and I'll sweep the floor. So, other than that, what do you want to know? Oh, I went to China. I forgot about that. Now, in England, or in India, we had powdered eggs for breakfast. You know, did you ever have powdered eggs?
Yes, I did in Navy.
You did. She missed them, huh? Green, they get green. By the time you got them, they were green. Well, anyhow, in China, how do you want them? They had fresh eggs over there. And, of course, at this time, I was on secret orders. Didn't know why I went to China. And the B-29s were coming, which we didn't know anything about. Never even heard about them, B-29. And they were building runways at 5 different locations up and around Chengdu, China. And so there we set up the radio station. I only set up one in what we called they were called A1, A2, A3, A4, and A5. And at A1, which was headquarters, it was the first one to open up, of course, and we also put up a homing station, so that and that was the only homing station over there. But they had little charts that we made of where other stations were and what magnetic direction they were in, so the guys could shoot a bearing on Chengdu and then turn to find their own airfield if it were bad weather, you know. Otherwise they could find it on their own. So that's my story.
Well, while you were over there, did you by chance happen to be in the Burma area, fly the Burma hump or something?
Oh yeah, yeah. You had to fly the hump.
What was that like?
In order to get to China, but the Japanese could fly. They could come up with pursuits and shoot the airplanes down if they could hit them. But their aircraft was limited. All aircraft is limited to how far it can go, you know, with gasoline, people, gross weight, and everything else. So they, at first, we would not fly straight. They'd fly around, because we were flying from Assam to mostly to Kunming, and that's southeast. So you had to fly over Japanese occupied places, and they could come up. We'd try to keep out of their range. See if they came up and got in a dogfight or started doing too many maneuvers, they'd run out of fuel before they could get back to their base too. So now, I'll tell you a funny story. You won't believe it, but it was on the History Channel not too long ago. I was with a B-25 outfit, which is the Mitchell bomber, the light one, and they were being inspected by General Stilwell and a couple of colonels, big wheels, because we were going to go into Merrill's Marauders were in Burma already. They were behind the enemy line. And they had one was Broadway. I forget the name of the other one. But anyhow, they were ready for us to come in. We were going to tow gliders in and early in the morning and drop the gliders with with Indian soldiers, British soldiers, our engineers, aircraft or airborne engineers, and light machines, you know, bulldozers, graders, and things like that. All that would fit in an airplane, C-47. C-47, you know, a big Ryder or U-Haul van that you'd rent to move your house could carry more than the C-47. So anyhow, we were being inspected. I was in the control tower that day, and the general asked, now the line sergeant, you know what a line sergeant is in the Air Force?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He was a master sergeant, and he built like a bulldog and looked like one. And I think he was as tough as one. He wasn't very tall, but his shoulders were as big as he was. And nobody wanted to tangle with him. But anyhow, they didn't need to, because he was a nice guy. And the general said to the Colonel Philpott, he said, have you got everything? Do they have everything they need? And the Colonel says, Sergeant, do you have everything you need? He said, yes, sir. We got everything we need, but you know, we haven't had a damn beer since we've been here. The General said, is that right, Colonel? Colonel says, yes, it is, sir. We haven't had a beer. He says, well, you get an airplane ready and go to Calcutta, and you'll have a load of beer tomorrow morning. Well, you know, there's no place on a bomber to put a load, only in a bomb bay. And there you can only hang so much on a thing. So you put boards in. Now, the outside of the airplane is thin aluminum. The inside, right down the middle of the bomb bay, is a big beam. It's an aluminum beam, but it's a big heavy one, just because it has to hold the whole airplane together. So you put boards in there, but the boards out here are on chewing gum. So we had they went on a bridge busting mission that morning because they weren't sure when they were going to. That was a secret. The generals knew, but we didn't know when they were going to go into Burma. And so the bombers were coming back to land when the guys from Calcutta with the beer were also coming home. And of course, when these guys go out, there's usually two operators in the control tower, plus the air officer. He's like the officer of the day. And one guy will call the airplane, he's got field glasses, 425, the other guy writes it down. You know, 522, so forth. So you got a list of all the airplanes that took off. Well, when they're coming back, you do the same thing. Well, you got this one guy that's numbers in a different spot, and that's the one coming from Calcutta, and he's calling for landing instructions. So the air officer says, is that the guy from Calcutta with the beer? And I said, yeah. He said, ask him if the mission was accomplished. So I asked him, and he said, Roger Dodger, mission accomplished. And these bombers, at most air bases, the colonel in charge would not let the airplanes buzz the field because it's too dangerous a job buzzing the field. The pursuits all did it when they came home because they came in, make a quick turn and landed. But that's what that's what this guy was going to do. And he came in. Now that airplane probably flew at 220, 230 miles an hour. But when he put the nose down and tried to buzz the field, he's going a lot faster than that. And when he went to pull it up at the end of the thing, you know what centrifugal force did to the beer? Out. It all went out the bottom of the airplane. And so, and it happened to be Jake Rupert's Knickerbocker beer from New York in tiny bottles, 24 bottles to a case with sawdust all around them. Now, a lot of them didn't break because they slid. A lot of them broke. They told us not to drink it because it could be broken glass in the bottles. So some guys devise ways of straining it. They, GIs, they find a way to drink it. Put it in a boot or something. So they did, and there wasn't much to say about it that I recall. The only thing that I didn't like was when it was on the History Channel, it showed a guy talking to it told about the beer, and it showed a guy talking to them on the radio, and it wasn't me that they dubbed in, but it was supposed to be either me or Smitty, the guy that was with me, and it didn't look like him, too tall for him, but anyhow, that's what the guy said it was.
I'm curious, you mentioned how you went into the service with one of your friends.
Yeah,
Where did you part ways?
in Madison, Wisconsin. He ended up in the same outfit. Now, our outfit was worldwide. The Army Airways Communications System, which is now the FAA. We were the forerunners of that. He ended up in Christmas Island in the Pacific, which is a small little joint in the Pacific. We lived in straw huts. You got that handy, Phil? Did you find that letter?
Yes, I did.
Well, anyhow, we lived in straw huts. They made the natives thatch roof, bamboo, just like this. Here's one that somebody made for us. That's what we lived in at the airfields in India. And this one here is made for 8 people. It's got cots in it, mosquito netting, so forth, and a lot of spiders, and a lot of mice. Now, personally, I never saw one, but they had other guys. I saw dead cobras that the guys shot in other barracks, but I never saw one in ours. It could have been there, but because they were in other ones, but I never saw one. Never saw a tiger in ours either. But they did come around. The tigers, they had to be old. They had to be in some kind of trouble medically, otherwise they wouldn't come near you. But so anyhow, what do you do with your shoes at nighttime when you go to bed? Throw them on the floor? When you were a kid, you threw them on your floor so your mother could pick them up the next day.
All over them and whatever.
Yeah. Well, here's Tom. We took our shoes off and we tied them together and we hung them on the post, on the mosquito netting post, and when you went to put them on in the morning, you took them off very gently, carefully, turn them with the point and bang them on the floor in case there was a spider or scorpion something like that, in the shoe, you know. So you never put your shoes on the floor. Your second pair of shoes, you know, I mean, you always had 2 pair. Your second pair, and a lot of guys had 3, because they had this kind of shoe, not a boot. Well, they had, you know, dress uniform when you went to, you didn't go to town in India, but, well, you did sometimes. Anyhow, when we went to bed, we had 3 things went to bed with us. Aerosol bomb with DDT, spray it all around the netting to get the mosquitoes. Flashlight, because if you had to go in the middle of the night, you didn't dare swing your legs out and put, you shine a flashlight all around the floor, see what was there. And your Army 45 under your pillow, just in case there was a tiger or something. And of course, you'd probably shoot your neighbor. But anyhow, that's
if
the
you
way.
had too much beer, you thought you saw a
Well,
tiger.
you didn't get the beer.
Okay.
We did get what we called a jungle ration once in a while, and then it was hot, and we had British anti-aircraft around the airfields, and some British soldiers, Gurkha soldiers, and the Gurkha soldiers, we'd give them some beer. The British soldiers, we traded, because they had scotch and gin, good stuff. And they liked hot beer. Now, when that beer is, when that beer is hot, you pop the top, and you know what happens. Not on them guys. They could take that thing and pop that top and get it in their mouth before they lost a drop of it. They were experts at it. So we traded with them, and then we go to the mess sergeant, and we had those big cans of grapefruit juice, and I don't know, I think we had some orange juice. But anyhow, we'd trade with we'd give the sergeant some beer, and he'd give us, retaliate. You got that thing?
Be-
Yeah.
Getting back, you mentioned General Stilwell.
Yeah.
He was known as Vinegar Joe.
Right.
How did he ever get the name Vinegar Joe?
Because he was a,
Meanie, huh?
yeah, he really was. And he didn't get along with Chiang Kai-shek at all. And Chiang Kai-shek's wife had President Roosevelt wrapped around her fingers. And I can tell you a story about that too. But here's something that one of our guys wrote, and he says, "Memories of the CBI. Some were sent by troop ships, others went by air. It was still the CBI, however you got there. They told us our rations would suit us to a T. Most of what they served us was labeled K or C. China had a crisis. They needed air supply. The route was over humps higher than we could fly. We lived in huts called bashes. We didn't mind dirt floors. When it rained, they leaked so bad, you floated out the doors. We went up to Lido to build a road with pick. That's General Pick. We built it over hills so steep, the mountain goats got sick. Supplies were often sent by air, ammo, food, and more. And if there was no landing strip, we pushed it out the door. Merrill's Marauders needed supplies, so you popped it out with parachutes. We saw elephants, monkeys, tigers, cobras, and the rest. It was leeches and mosquitoes that seemed to like us best. The war was now long over, and memories go dim, but we remember friends we lost, like Tex and John and Slim. Now they call us veterans, but as the years go by, we still remember the job we did in a hell called CBI. One of our guys wrote that. I think she made a copy for you.
Okay. Now you mentioned you got malaria.
Yeah, actually, that's what I thought I had, and I went down to the VA to register and get it signed up, and my record says I had dengue fever, which is a form of malaria, but it causes arthritis.
I got arthritis.
Yeah. And nothing they can do about it now. And I could start a hullabaloo, but be too much trouble.
Mm-hmm. What was the weather and all like when you were stationed
Well,
over there?
depends on where you were.
Right, it's a big country.
This time right now, if you were in what they call Bangladesh, which is Bengal province at them days, temperature during the day could raise to probably 120, but dry as this rug. And you couldn't work on an airplane. It was just too hot. We wouldn't dare touch it without gloves on. It burned you from the heat because the aluminum. You know? And this is May, June. Next month, from there till the end of September, you could guarantee you get the monsoons, heavy rain, real bad heavy rain. I forget how many inches a year, but it comes to feet. And your shoes got mildewed, your belt got mildewed, you got a rash around where your belt was. Prickly heat, they call it. Up in Assam, it was about the same, because Bangladesh and Bengal are only feet above, 2 or 3 feet above sea level. So the storms come in from up the Bay of Bengal, and they hit the Himalaya mountain or the Chindit mountains first, then the Himalayas, and they go up. Now here, in this country, the temperature drop is between 2 and 3 degrees per 1,000 feet of altitude. Over there it's between about 5 and 6 degrees per foot of altitude, or per 1,000 feet of altitude. So when you got in an airplane, you go like this. After you got up there, you had to put heavy winter clothes on, or freeze. And the airplanes weren't pressurized, so you were outside temperature, and the turbulence was terrific. You wouldn't believe the turbulence. Take a C-47 with 10 or 12 barrels of gasoline in it, turn it on its end, and go up 1,000 1,500 feet, and then drop the same thing on the others, you know, and it was a nice ride.
What about Japanese combat? Did they periodically hit your area?
Oh, yeah, they not the foot soldier.
The
The
Air-
Air Corps is usually at a relatively safe place, but the bombers would come over pretty near every day, and about 3 o'clock. The Japanese they got watches. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you could almost guarantee you'd get what we call a photo Joe. And he'd fly over to see what was at the airfield. Well, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our airplanes were out bombing their railroads. So there was nothing for them to take a picture of. So we had orders not to shoot at them. Let them take the pictures. And of course, the Japanese would get them back, look at them, say, hey, there ain't nothing there. But they'd come over a day or so later and drop bombs just to be nasty. Same with, I got a Christmas card from one of the guys, and he says, you remember Christmas Eve, 1944? Well, Christmas Eve, 1944, they tried to bomb all the airfields we had, right around 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock, Christmas Eve, just to harass us, you know, bother us. We did more harassing than they did of us.
While you were over in China, did you ever have an opportunity to meet up with the Flying Tigers?
Oh yeah,
Schadalt's group?
yes, saw them, yeah, yeah.
Did they provide any fighter protection or so at any
Yeah,
time?
they did with their P-40, yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the first, they were the first ones there. Now, of course, you've got to know that they were supposedly civilians, but they were all military men. They were supposed to have resigned their commission in the military and went over there, and they got paid for shooting down Japanese airplanes. As soon as the war was over, or no, as soon as the war started, the government started putting them in the Army Air Corps. Some guys got out of it, kept out of it. You heard of General Scott? Well, he wrote God is My Co-Pilot. He stayed and became a part of the 14th Air Force. Pappy Blankton, heard of him? Well, he was an ace. He shot down 12 Japanese airplanes as a supposedly civilian, but he got out of there. He snuck out and got on a civilian ship that was going back to the States. And of course, you know the rest of his story in the Pacific. So, you know, he never got out, really, because they gave him his commission back and everything. So, yeah, we saw him.
Can you recall what it was like when it was announced that the war was over?
Oh yeah, I was back. I was in someplace. Where the hell was I? I had just transferred. See, I had enough points. I was there a long time. had enough points to be discharged. But there weren't no rotations at that time. But anyhow, my group got orders to go to China. And I should have went to China with them. But I was pulled off, the only guy, and I was sent to a place up in Bangladesh, which is now Bengal, or the other way around, was Bengal. And I was sent there about well, I was there July. I know I was there July 4th. And the war was announced the 15th?
August, I believe.
Yeah, August 15th. And there was some minor celebrations. But, and where we were, we didn't even have a 45 or anything to shoot with. So we couldn't make any noises. But we had some parties, and everybody said, I'm going home, I'm going home. Well, I got my orders to go home on like about the 18th or 20th, something like that. And I was on ship out of Calcutta, I think on the 28th. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was about the 28th. We went down into the Bay of Bengal and dropped anchor. And they told us the reason they were doing that is because they weren't sure that all the Japanese submarines had received notice, and it was fair game for them to sink the ship. So we stayed there about 2 days, and then we went up through the Arabian Sea, up into, or the Persian Gulf rather, up into Suez Canal, across the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic, and we were in New York on about the... You got them papers still on
Which one?
when we got in New York City?
Is it in that big book?
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I was here in Aldewan on Columbus Day, 1945. And I got 45 days delay in delivery in reporting to Texas. First class Pullman accommodation.
Wow.
Yeah, first class. Meal tickets, 12 meals. But anyhow,
I don't know what it is.
well, it's in there someplace. I ain't gonna find it now either.
So what was it like here in town, and how were you received? And
Here? Well, I didn't know any, I didn't come from here. So I didn't know anybody here. But on Aldeban Boulevard, there's a bowling alley. Downstairs, there used to be a bar. And of course, the only clothes I had was military. So I had my Class A's on. My brother, who lived here on Prospect Street, he and I went down to the bar to see if we could drink all the beer they had. And a fellow walked in, and he had the same patch on his shoulder that I had on mine. So we got talking. It was Ernie Orsini. Did you ever hear Ernie Orsini in Alabama? He was a radio operator on C-47 over there. And so we got drinking beer and telling lies and that. And he was the only one I knew. And then after a while, I found out. Remember Ward Ackerman? Are you natives of the Voorheesville area?
I've heard of Ward Ackerman.
Yeah.
The names are all very familiar.
Yeah. Well, he's like Cornell was in Voorheesville.
Mhm.
His nephew was a pilot over there, and his nephew married a nurse. So I got friendly with him. And of course, my brother was in the fire department. I got in there, and I joined the VFW. And so you get, you know, get to know everybody.
So
By
it
chance-
I was
By
going to-
chance, did you ever have any reunions with the old squadron?
Oh yeah, all the time, every year,
Where were they held? All over?
all
Or
over the country.
all over the country?
We've been to Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, California.
That's a pretty good sampling of them, and they
Yeah.
all kept
Oh, yeah.
active with each other.
There's one in Louisville, Kentucky, Labor Day weekend. And they're talking about having one in Washington, D.C. next year, and we're going to disband, not have any more, because it's getting too hard to get around. But I personally, Washington, D.C., it's, I don't think it's the place to have it. First thing is hotel, you know, probably $150 a night, and probably be up in, the hotel will be in Maryland or New Jersey, or, you know, it won't be in Washington, D.C.
So when you got out of the service, what did you do for a living then?
Well, my brother was in the oil company, in the oil business, and like Main Brothers or one of them, and I worked for him for a while, and then somebody told me about a guy who was looking for a salesman to sell auto parts, so I went to work for him, and I'd done from different auto parts, heavy duty truck parts, stuff.
Okay, well, this has been very enjoyable and interesting, and we thank you for your interview.
Mm-hmm.